Hello and welcome to the LIHEAP 101 Overview Part 1 webinar. This is the first of two-part series, and Part 2 will be conducted next Wednesday, February the 3rd from 1:30 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Each webinar part covers different topics, so be sure to attend both sessions. My name is Camille Taylor, and I will be your moderator for the brilliant LIHEAP Technical Assistant Team. Our presenters today are Yulia Razad and Tom Real. You are currently in listen-only mode. When dialing into the webinar, you should have entered the telephone number located on the webinar control panel located on the right-hand side of your screen. After entering in your telephone number and the access code, you should have also entered in your audio PIN. It is important that you enter the audio PIN, as this will allow me to enable to unmute you while you're on the line and be able to speak during the call. Please note that this webinar session is being recorded. This webinar recording will be posted on the LIHEAP Training Resources webpage at a later date. So if any of your team members were unable to attend today's session, this recorded webinar will be available in February for them to watch. We recognize that often there is a lot of staff turnover within LIHEAP programs with states and tribes. The purpose of these LIHEAP 101 overview webinars is to help new or existing LIHEAP program staff have a solid foundation in what LIHEAP is, the roles, regulations, and responsibilities that come with administering your LIHEAP program, and to give you that understanding before the regional conferences. Those conferences will provide a great opportunity for networking with other LIHEAP grantees and learning more about specific topics. So before we cover the agenda for today's session, I'd like to introduce our two speakers. Yulia Razad is an Energy Program Policy Specialist at the Office of Community Services, Administration for Children and Families within the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Our primary responsibilities are providing training and technical assistance to LIHEAP grantees, LIHEAP policy development, and integrating information technology into the day-to-day business of LIHEAP grant administration. Prior to joining HHS, Yulia spent 5 years working on LIHEAP and Weatherization in a local agency in California. Tom Real is a member of the Brilliant Team Technical Assistant Team, the Technical Assistant Team. Tom spent most of his career with the state of Indiana in the administration of social services programs. For 6 years, he headed the state agency's Quality Assurance Unit, which monitored LIHEAP and DOE weatherization, among other community service programs. For 3 years, he also served as the Indiana LIHEAP Director. Since retiring in 2003, Tom has been involved in several projects with state agencies assisting in updates of their energy assistance and weatherization program policies and procedures. In 2010, Tom participated as a program evaluation weatherization expert with the National Weatherization Program Evaluation Project. Last year, he began working with Brilliant in providing direct technical assistance through grantee site visits around the country. Tom and his wife Linda currently reside in north central Pennsylvania. During the Part 1 of the LIHEAP 101 overview, Tom and Yulia are going to discuss LIHEAP eligibility, administration requirements, benefits, and budgets. We'll also cover resources at the end of the presentation, followed by the Q&A session. I will now turn the presentation over to Yulia to provide an introduction to LIHEAP.
Thanks, Camille, and thank you everybody for joining us for Part 1 of the LIHEAP 101 overview. As Camille said, this is a two-part webinar, and the second part will be on February 3rd. Next slide. So I'd like to just briefly review the overall purpose and goals of LIHEAP. The LIHEAP statute, written by Congress, established LIHEAP as a means of assisting low-income households in meeting their immediate home energy needs. And we were asked to primarily focus on households with the lowest income who pay the highest proportion of their income for home energy. Next slide. LIHEAP assistance can take different forms. Most of you are familiar with the primary form of LIHEAP assistance, which is bill payment assistance for heating or cooling bills. But LIHEAP is also used to intervene in energy crisis situations and help households through an energy crisis or emergency. LIHEAP can be used to perform low-cost weatherization, which is a type of residential home retrofitting that makes a home more energy efficient. You will often see in our materials we abbreviate the word weatherization with the letters WX. And then LIHEAP funds can also be used for energy education and counseling services that are designed to eliminate or reduce the need for future energy assistance. And now I'm going to turn it over to Tom, and he's going to talk a little bit about LIHEAP eligibility.
Thank you, Julia. Eligibility for LIHEAP is primarily based on the level of the household's income. And now the grantees have the responsibility for establishing the income limits for the program, and there is some flexibility in terms of the level that those limits are established. However, the statute does say that income guidelines can't be any higher than 150% of the federal poverty level, or alternately, a grantee may use 60% of the state median income level. The statute also goes on to say that eligibility may not be established at a lower level than 110% of the federal poverty level. So within that range, however, the state or the grantee has the responsibility to choose the proper eligibility limits. Now, note that the federal poverty level and the state median income level are refigured each year, so that means that the grantee must update their eligibility guidelines on an annual basis. Grantees may choose to make certain categories of applicants categorically eligible for the program. And this is based on the fact that the categories of the programs that you see listed here have eligibility limits that are basically lower than LIHEAP. So if you're eligible for TANF, for example, then you're going to be eligible for LIHEAP. So the program allows for the use of categorical eligibility for the items that are listed here. There's a webinar online. You can see the link, the web link there, that goes into that in a little more detail. Now, this isn't a requirement of LIHEAP, and if a grantee decides to use categorical eligibility to identify households eligible for LIHEAP assistance, the grantee must use a means-tested benefit program. Obviously, if you're going to figure out the household's income, one of the important definitions that the grantee needs to have in place is the definition of a household. And there can be some variation in that, but the LIHEAP statute, again, does offer a definition of households, and any other definition must fit in within that. And as you can see here, that's defined as an individual or a group of individuals who are living together as an economic unit, and for whom residential energy is customarily purchased in common, or who have undesignated payments for energy in the form of utilities included in their rent. Next slide, please. The additional grantee policies that bear on the subject of household definitions that the grantee needs to look at are what grantee wants to qualify as vulnerable or targeted households. And these definitions are generally elderly and disabled and young children. And then there might be others such as I've seen certainly high energy burden is a group that might be targeted. I've seen one state that targets working poor. So there is some flexibility here, but it's important to define these vulnerable households because those definitions will come into play in other parts of the program. When you're talking about the makeup of a household, you have to make some other decisions in terms of What do you do about Rivers and Borders, for example, or students who go away to college for a portion of the year, or caregivers? So there are other policies, too, that the grantee will need to face in terms of eligibility policies on the next slide. And you can read through these questions, but I think if you're new to LIHEAP or you're currently working in LIHEAP, these are some questions that are pretty fundamental in terms of the program. Now, likely the programs have been in place and a lot of these questions have been answered, but it never hurts to review them and to determine as a program manager, for example, if the current policies are doing the job in terms of your program. So these are some of the things that I would ask you to reflect on in terms of the design of your program policy. And I'll turn it back over to Yulia, and she's going to talk about administrative requirements.
Thanks, Tom. Next slide, please. So the primary sources of federal laws and regulations that apply to how LIHEAP is administered are three that we're going to talk about here today. One is the LIHEAP statute. That is the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Act of 1981. Another is the LIHEAP regulations that are found in Title 45 of the Code of Federal Regulations in Part 96. Part 96 applies to block grants specifically, and within block grants, of which LIHEAP is one, Subpart H is specific to LIHEAP itself. There are other portions of Part 96 outside of Subpart H that also apply to LIHEAP. And the third set of kind of principles and regulations that apply directly to LIHEAP administration is also in Title 45. This is Part 75, which represents the Department of Health and Human Services adoption of the uniform administrative requirements, cost principles, and audit requirements. Next slide, please. Grantees have quite a bit of flexibility when it comes to the administration of LIHEAP. The LIHEAP statute sets a federal framework for LIHEAP, but it sets a framework that is relatively broad. By design, LIHEAP is a block grant, which means that the primary decisions on the day-to-day administration of the program are left to the grantees to make. The statute and the regulations do not provide specific day-to-day operational guidance for how to administer LIHEAP. Most of those decisions are left to the grantee to develop. The Department of Health and Human Services basically defers to grantees in their interpretation of the federal LIHEAP statute, except where we find that the interpretation is clearly erroneous. And if we do find that something you have done is a clearly erroneous interpretation of the LIHEAP statute, you would basically have to stop those activities or stop doing part of LIHEAP administration in that way and revert to an interpretation that we find to be acceptable. Our block grant regulations in Part 96 of Title 45 provide a little bit more detail in certain parts of LIHEAP administration, but there are mostly the regulations again defer to the grantee. In section 96.30, which is something I have memorized because we refer to it quite a bit, the grantee is basically told that they must obligate and spend LIHEAP funds in accordance with state laws and procedures for state funds. And if you're a Native American tribe, this would mean that it would be in accordance with the tribal laws and procedures for tribal funds. And that means that unless there is a specific federal exception or rule that applies to LIHEAP funds specifically, if there is no rule, that means that the rules that should be followed are the states or tribes' own rules for how they handle their own funds. Next slide. The Uniform Administrative Requirements is a compilation of guidance and circulars by the Office of Management and Budget, and they govern how all federal grants are administered. This is a very lengthy document, lengthy set of regulations. However, not all parts of the regulations apply to LIHEAP. Only certain sections of the requirements apply to LIHEAP, and because LIHEAP is a block grant and block grants are exempted from certain portions of these regulations. There is a link for a webinar that we gave last year on the Uniform Administrative Requirements, and we go through in great detail which sections are applicable to LIHEAP and which sections are not. If you haven't looked at this webinar yet, I really encourage you to do so, because these requirements are in effect for all funds that have been received beginning October 1st, 2015. So the funding that you received for this fiscal year from our office is subject to the Uniform Administrative Requirements. Next slide, please. So there's, every year when you submit the model plan, we ask that your Chief Executive Officer, which is either the governor or the tribe's chairperson or president, certify to the 16 assurances of the LIHEAP statute. And what the 16 assurances are very broad statements within the LIHEAP law that basically are you as the grantee, your promise that you will fulfill the requirements of the law. But these statements and these requirements are relatively broad. We have a summary of what Assurance 10 asks up on the screen. And basically, it asks that each grantee make sure that they have fiscal procedures in place to assure the proper disbursal of and accounting for federal funds and for monitoring the use of those funds. So they ask that you have procedures in place, but they don't tell you what procedures they should be. They don't tell you what proper disbursal means. They don't tell you how monitoring is defined. And so this is a really great example, because for the most part, many of the assurances are relatively broad in that respect. And so when we ask you to complete the LIHEAP model plan every year, in many ways that plan is asking you for more detail. Every question in the model plan is tied somehow to a broad requirement of the statute, where we would like to know from you, how are you going to be fulfilling this requirement more specifically? Next slide, please. We do spend quite a bit of time in LIHEAP talking about program integrity. And by program integrity, we mean the processes and procedures that you have built into the day-to-day administration of LIHEAP that ensures that the funds are spent appropriately and properly. There is a whole section of the LIHEAP model plan, section 17, dedicated entirely to issues of program integrity. And some of the things that we talk about are how you document household eligibility. How do you know that a household is eligible? What proof do they provide to you of their income eligibility and of any other eligibility requirements that you set? How do you identify the members of the household? What evidence do you ask for of the residence of those members within that household? How do you ensure that the person taking down all of this information and making all of these decisions is doing so accurately? Is there somebody else who reviews case files to make sure that no mistakes have been made? Do you use any sort of third-party verification of the information that you receive from the clients, or do you just take the word of the client themselves? What procedures do you have in place to report, to identify, report, and act on cases of waste, fraud, and abuse? There are usually procedures in every state through their Office of the Inspector General or their Secretary of State to report fraud, and we often would like to make sure that those procedures are well known and available to LIHEAP clients, to intake workers working at the subrecipient level, and to employees at the grantees department themselves so that they know what to do if they feel that there is something happening that is wrong or not okay with LIHEAP funds. We also want to know what kind of monitoring happens. How do you monitor both the programmatic and the fiscal aspects of the LIHEAP program? And we talk a lot about audits, both ensuring that audits are performed of your subrecipients and to make sure that you review both audits of the subrecipients and of your own organizational audits and follow up and making sure that there are sufficient corrective action plans in place to resolve any problems that have been identified. Now I'm going to turn it over to Tom again, and he's going to talk about what we're calling here regular LIHEAP benefits.
Thank you, Julia. The main function, of course, of LIHEAP is to assist eligible households with their utility costs, and this is in the form of a cash benefit. That benefit is targeted to households in that the highest level of assistance to households will go to households with the lowest income and the highest energy costs and energy need in relation to that income. The regular benefits generally, next slide please. The regular benefits generally are either the heating benefits in most states and can though include cooling benefits in other states. The national median maximum benefit, just to give you some idea of heating benefits in nationally, is $815. The benefit, the heating benefit, is normally applied to the primary heating source, and then sometimes a smaller benefit will be applied to a secondary utility, particularly in the situation where the secondary utility is needed to operate the primary source. Obviously, the cooling benefits, although sometimes offered in the north when funds are available, are more often offered in the southern regions of the country. Again, just to give you an idea, the national median maximum benefit in cooling is $600. Cooling programs are operated by 23 of the states, at my last count. Next slide, please. This gives you a little more of a picture of the way that grantees budget their benefit money. And you can see there a national average for heating, cooling, crisis, and weatherization in terms of the percentage of their grant that they put into those categories of expenditure for benefits. I've also just set up what I call the southern average, which is an average of 13 most southern tier states. And you can see there that the cooling percentage is a much higher percentage of the overall benefits than in the northern average that I have below that, which is includes 20 northern tier states. Obviously, the heating benefits far outweigh the cooling benefits. You can also get a notion there of the averages in terms of how much money is in weatherization on a national average basis or median level basis, and crisis. Those grantees are required to put crisis money aside, or have it available rather, for use through March 15th of each year. So a certain percentage, usually based on the historical data in the grantee's territory, is put aside for crisis. So when you're computing the benefit, the regular benefit is generally computed on household income according to household size and the utility costs and utility factors in the household. Some grantees use other factors for the benefits. I mentioned a while ago the vulnerable population categories. Frequently dollars or points on a benefit matrix are added if you have a household with a frail elderly member or a disabled member or a young child. One important thing is that the grantee needs to further define those categories. Obviously, for example, elderly are usually defined as are frequently defined as a person over 60, but it could be a different age. Same with young children. Disabled also might require some sort of verification of the disability. I wanted to let you know too that there are a couple of or a few other factors that sometimes come into play when computing the benefits. Some states may add a few dollars for regional differences within their state. I know in the state of Indiana where I worked, we actually had 3 different dollar amounts that we added, and it was based on the fact that in the northern part of the state, the number of heating degrees days was higher than in the middle and southern section. So that sometimes those kinds of factors are added to it. Sometimes they begin with a base minimum benefit amount. As I mentioned a while ago, perhaps add a little for a secondary utility that's needed. And then even a supplemental benefit occasionally if the state finds later in the year maybe a supplemental appropriation has come through, that the easiest way might be to just add a small benefit to households that have already been served. So benefits are computed on the dollars assigned to each factor. This computation varies quite a bit from grantee to grantee. The grantee may assign a benefit amount according to income ranges or energy cost rate ranges. May pay some grantees, a couple I've run across, have they actually set a percentage of the household's actual energy costs that they try to pay, and those are based on formulas. Or they may pay a flat amount based on the cost of energy, and other factors there too. Let me turn now with the next slide to talk just a minute about a specific example of how a regular benefit is computed. Now again, this varies quite a bit, but in this sample, points are assigned by factor in each category. So then at the end, the points are basically added up and taken times a dollar rate, and that rate then equals the regular benefit. The beauty of this setup is that to adjust the benefit amounts based on your funding levels, all you have to really do is adjust the dollar rate, and that can affect your benefit expenditures one way or the other according to your need. Once the points are added up, of course, the higher the total points, the higher the benefit amount. Let's look at a chart here on the next slide that shows that in chart form. In this particular state, the state first figures the range where the income level in the household falls, so that if a household's income is at poverty, 100% of poverty or below, then they're assigned 3 points. If they're between 100 and the maximum of 150%, they're assigned 2 points. This state also assigns points for vulnerability factors, elderly, disabled, and young children, at 2 points each. Some states may just assign 2 points if any of those factors are present in the category. Or you could, if you felt like your priority was with the elderly, for example, you could assign 3 points there, 2 in disabled and 1 with the children under 6. In other words, you have flexibility for setting these things up according to your own priorities in your program. Then a key category, of course, is the energy burden computation that the state makes. And the energy burden is basically the percentage of income that a household pays for utility costs. So the formula utility cost divided by income comes up with a percentage. And then the points in this instance are assigned based on the level of that percentage. So if you have a high energy burden, 16% and above, your household receives 3 points, 11 to 15, and you can read on down there, and then no points if you have a lower eligibility or a lower energy burden at 0 to 5%. This state adds points based on some other factors. I think actually this business about the utilities included in the rent, what this state actually does is assign just 1 point for the energy burden computation. And then this must have been formulated a couple of years ago when propane shot up so high, but they add 2 points for the propane user because of the additional costs of propane. So again, these things can be adjusted many different ways. Basically, you get down to the bottom line of adding up the points and taking them times your dollar rate, and you end up with the household's benefit. So it's a pretty neat little formula, and most states have some form of a matrix, not necessarily this one, but some form of a benefit matrix or a formula that takes all these categories into account to determine the benefit. Now I'll turn it back to Yulia to talk about crisis benefits.
Great, thanks, Tom. So the LIHEAP statute does have some specific requirements when it comes to providing an intervention in a time of an energy crisis. The concept of an energy crisis is actually defined in the statute as something that is a weather-related supply shortage or energy-related emergency. And so this definition, like most things in a block grant statute, is relatively broad. So the majority of grantees add more specific criteria to operationalize that definition so that it could be used by intake workers in the fields. Some common crisis criteria are households that have their utility disconnected or are at a threat of being disconnected, households that have run out of bulk fuel or will soon run out, or households that have heating or cooling equipment that is inoperable during a time of severe temperature, either some very, very hot or very, very cold. The LIHEAP statute does have a very specific requirement that crisis funds be held available until March 15th of each year. In this case, the concept of the year is based on the federal fiscal year, so it means that crisis funds must be available from October 1st through March 15th of any given fiscal year, the first 6 months. That means very practically that you cannot run out of crisis assistance or have local agencies run out of crisis funds prior to March 15th of any given year. Next slide. The LIHEAP statute also places very strict and specific requirements on how quickly crisis intervention must be provided. It says that a household must receive a crisis intervention within 48 hours of application approval or within 18 hours of application approval if they are deemed to be in a life-threatening crisis. So that again means operationally that each grantee must have separate specific definitions of what is considered a crisis and what is considered a life-threatening crisis, so that those people doing intake and making decisions on how quickly to provide an intervention know when they have to follow the 48-hour rule and when they have to follow the 18-hour rule. These are questions that we ask you in the LIHEAP model plan. There are different kinds of crisis programs that are operated by grantees. You have several different options. You can run a crisis program just during the winter months. You can run a crisis program just during the summer months. You can run a crisis program both in the wintertime, take a break during the spring, and again during the summertime, and then take a break during the fall. Or you can run a year-round crisis program where you can apply any time during the year. Each of these options have different policy implications. When you make these decisions, they will all result in different consequences in terms of availability of funding, levels of benefits, and if you are in the midst of trying to make this decision for next year, this is definitely something that your LIHEAP regional liaison can help you think through. Because when you do fill out the LIHEAP model plan and submit it come September 1st, you will need to tell us what kind of crisis program you will be running. Next slide, please. There are different kinds of crisis interventions that can be provided, and I want to note that in the previous slide when I spoke about the 48-hour and the 18-hour timelines, the intent of the statute is not per se that a payment be made or a furnace be fixed within 48 hours or within 18 hours. But what the expectation is that the grantee provides some kind of intervention that will even temporarily kind of alleviate or fix the crisis until there is enough time to provide the full benefit. And there are different kinds of crisis benefits and services that can be provided. The most typical is an additional bill assistance payment. So some grantees use the same eligibility guidelines and benefit matrix as they would for their regular heating or cooling program, but they process that payment faster if you are in a crisis situation. Some grantees choose to pay a bill payment assistance benefit only if you've already received your regular benefit and it has been exhausted. In other words, if you're in a crisis situation and you haven't received the regular benefit, you will first be required to apply for and exhaust that benefit before coming back to receive a crisis payment. Other grantees choose to alleviate the crisis using the specific crisis using the bill payment benefit up to a maximum amount. So in other words, if you come and you're in a shut-off situation, your bill is $317, you will be issued a benefit for $317, assuming that the maximum is more than that. Maybe the maximum is $400. However, bill payment assistance is not the only type of crisis services that can be provided. You can provide things like blankets, space heaters, or fans in a cooling crisis. You can provide temporary emergency shelter. You can provide transportation to a heating or cooling center, and you can provide repair and replacement of inoperable heating or cooling equipment. You know, obviously you can't fix a furnace in 18 hours, but you can provide blankets and space heaters within 18 hours until such time that you can have somebody come and repair a furnace. Next slide, please. There's a certain degree of case management that can also be included as part of your crisis services. Intake workers often intervene with utility companies on behalf of LIHEAP clients to arrange for payment plans or to ensure that clients are not shut off pending the receipt of their LIHEAP benefits. There is a certain amount of budget counseling and energy education that happens that with the goal of helping clients to ensure that they don't wind up in a similar crisis situation, you know, 2 months from now when another cold or hot snap hits, or next year at the same time. And then intake workers do quite a bit of resource coordination, especially in situations where client's bill is very, very high and the LIHEAP benefit alone will not resolve the crisis. In those cases, intake workers spend quite a bit of time trying to help the client pull together other sources of benefits in their community, from the utility company, from local other organizations, or churches, other places that can provide resources toward paying an energy bill. Next slide. Now I'm going to turn it over to Tom, and he's going to talk about budgets in LIHEAP.
Thanks again, Yulia. The need for a budget, I think, is pretty important. And if you're new to LIHEAP and you're coming into the program, I urge you to look at the program's overall budget, determine from that budget what the program's priorities are, and the budget can be used to track the performance of the program throughout the year. Likely you have other fiscal staff who help you with this, but I still think as a program person it's very important that you yourself keep track of the budget. The LIHEAP statute spells out some of the ways that the grant funds can be used, and some of the limitations on those uses of the grant funds. Excuse me. The grant funds may be used to plan and develop and administer the program, conduct outreach activities to help bring more people into the program, make the program known, obviously provide the cash benefits in the program, as Yulia just discussed, to intervene in energy crisis situations that a household presents with. Some of the money can be used for low-cost weatherization services, and then money can be used to provide services, case management and other services to reduce the energy need in the household. On the other hand, in the next slide, you'll see that there are limits in terms of the use of grant funds that are set by the statute, and the important limits include a 10% cap on your administrative costs, 15% of the funds that you receive in your LIHEAP grant can be used for weatherization activities, and we'll talk about that a little more in a minute. 5% of the funds can be used to provide services that reduce the need for energy assistance. And then 10% of the funds can be carried over. And as we've said a couple of times, crisis funds need to be available through March 15th. And then, of course, all remaining funds would be allocated towards the direct assistance. The administrative funds are determined by the grantee's definition of administration. So as with a number of things in the LIHEAP statute, there's quite a bit of room for your own, I won't use the word interpretation, but your own rules in terms of what administrative costs are. These, I think, represent a good list of typical administrative costs, and you can look those over in terms of your own definitions. The block grant regulations just more or less say to use the definition of administrative costs that you normally associate with the administration of your public assistance programs. States may have their own definitions written in code even that must be followed, and that's perfectly fine. Next slide, please. There are a few things to keep in mind in terms of administration. Again, the 10% limit on the total amount of administration that you can pay for. Tribes have a slightly different formula, and the amount, because of their lower grant amounts, and so the amount usually ends up being a little higher than 10% for them. Other information, include the administrative activities for all your program components across all levels of the program when you're computing your administrative costs. In other words, if you have allocated a certain amount of money, for example, to weatherization, well, then the administrative costs in that allocation of weatherization count against your 10% overall administrative cost cap. Again, I emphasize that the state's normal definitions of administration should be used, and LIHEAP administrative costs can be supplemented with other federal funds. Frequently, you find that CSBG is used to supplement LIHEAP administrative activities, for example, but those funds do count towards the overall 10% limit. Another area that you'll be able to fund out of LIHEAP, as we've said, is the weatherization program, and you can use up to 15% of your current year's grant for weatherization, and in fact there is a provision for a waiver to go up to 25%. I don't think any states do that at this point, but 28 states, those 28 grantees do transfer the full 15% of their LIHEAP grant to weatherization. Of course, weatherization being sort of a longer-term solution to the problem of high energy costs. Only 3 states don't transfer any money to weatherization, and then the others transfer, an amount up to the 15%. There's some of the activities listed there that are paid for under weatherization. Next slide, please. The allocated funds then are transferred, most often transferred to another division of the same grantee agency or to another agency, state agency, for the operation of weatherization. They'll be transferred most often to the agency that also operates the Department of Energy Weatherization program. The program can be operated entirely using Department of Energy Weatherization rules and regulations for the operation of the program, or in some cases some of the LIHEAP rules are applied, or some exceptions are carved out of the Department of Energy program, where LIHEAP has quite a bit more flexibility in some areas in terms of the use of the funds. So you can have sort of a combination of DOE regulations and then LIHEAP regulations. It's important that those exceptions be noted in the state plan. Activities that can be paid for under Assurance 16 of the LIHEAP grant include services to provide or reduce the need for energy assistance. This would be things like energy-related case management, budget counseling, particularly having to do with utility costs, and assessment of the household's needs. Services to help LIHEAP households effectively communicate with the energy vendors themselves, or to actually intervene with the energy vendors. And quite a few agencies have set up energy education programs or curricula, or make conservation efforts with the clientele. And these are all designed to reduce the need for energy assistance. And you can use up to 5% of the current year's grant for these activities. I just have to emphasize that these percentages mostly say up to. So if you want to experiment with a % or two, and for some of these activities, that's perfectly acceptable. In terms of Assurance 16 activities, there's a few things you need to keep in mind. One is that you need to be sure that the money used under that budget category, that those monies are tracked and properly allocated. In other words, if you say have a frontline staff person who takes applications and determines benefits, and you charge that to administration, but then maybe 10% of their time is spent in Assurance 16 activities with the household, and that is charged to Assurance 16, you need to be sure that that's charged on some basis in terms of an actual cost allocation and time studies or something like that. Assurance 16 activities are to be designed in such a way to have an impact on the client, and some sort of measurement of that impact should be in place. And you'll be asked in the model plan to provide a brief description of the level of that impact that your Assurance 16 services have fostered. One advantage to Assurance 16 money is that it has greater flexibility, and that it can be used with other federal funds, and those other federal funds do not count in terms of the 5% limit, unlike in administration. So if you're using CSBG funds for activities, so long as they qualify under CSBG, of course, if you're using those funds, that's fine, and it doesn't limit you in terms of that 5% cap on the funds. Another area that you may actually want the budget for, or at least plan for, is carryover. What kind of funds do you want to carry over into the new year? Usually states will do this purposely with at least a percentage of funds to have funds available to start up a new year. There are several things to remember when you're doing this. First, 90% of the funds payable to a grantee in any given year must be obligated in that year. Only 10% of the funds may be carried over as unobligated funds for obligation in the following fiscal year. So any unobligated funds that exceed that 10% that can be carried over would have to be returned to HHS. So it's very important that you keep track, of course, of your carryover funds. Again, those funds that you carry over would be available for obligation in the next fiscal year. A couple of points to remember is that these carryover funds retain all of the maximum cap limitations from the year in which they were originally awarded. So you do not include carryover funds in the total for calculating the New Year's cap or to determine whether the New Year's caps, have been exceeded. And again, be sure to obligate all of the funds that are carried over in the succeeding year. Another category that you want to look at in terms of your budget and how you're going to prioritize your expenditures is program outreach and coordination. Now, a lot of this is publicizing your program, and you can see a list of some of the activities and materials and things that are commonly used, and you'll be asked again in your model plan to spell out some of the specifics that you use funds for in terms of outreach. Outreach also could be, to my way of thinking, keeping barriers away from preventing people from applying for the benefits. So you might have temporary application sites, say at a senior center, where you're targeting, again, seniors or disabled people with applications so that they have an equal opportunity to apply for the program. Finally, another budget category is leveraging, and some of this has fallen away a little bit because in the last few years we have not had a leveraging, a dollar amount allotted for leveraging, but it's still a worthwhile activity in a lot of ways. Leveraging basically it means that grantees are allowed to use a small amount of their money to leverage non-federal resources for the program that can be coordinated in terms of using those resources to help the energy assistance client, and also in assembling the information about those non-federal leveraged resources. It's a good idea to go ahead and keep a list of those resources in your state and keep track of them, because you want to have that in your state plan if then a leveraging program is revived and leveraging money becomes available. So I guess my final message in terms of this is that, as this guy is yelling, you need a budget. And the next slide gives you just an example of an overall general budget. Again, you probably will have people who will keep track of a lot of these details, but you want to periodically review this budget and review the expenditures against the budget to make sure that you're on track and you're not overutilizing or underutilizing your funds. This budget, for example, shows a total of dollars would be about $67 million. Yeah, a little over $67 million, and you can see they've put 10% for administration, and you can read on down the line there. The idea is that that top bunch of categories pretty much comes out of the total grant first, and then the remaining amount, in this case 65% of the grant, is available for bill payment assistance, and then you apply whatever percentages you have for those categories to your overall budget. And again, then this gives you some feel for how your program is performing throughout the year. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Yulia.
Great. So I'm just going to review some of the resources that are available to all of you as direct LIHEAP grantees. First and foremost is your human resource, our staff here at OCS. You have a dedicated regional liaison who is there to help you by phone, by email, or sometimes in person if we can make that arrangement. We are based in Washington, D.C., and if you go to the next slide, all of the folks that are regional liaisons are listed here. On our website, there is a listing of all of their information based by region, but also it breaks out which states fall into each region. So if you don't know if you're Region 2 or if you're Region 7, that is listed on our website, and the link to that page was on the previous slide. Next slide, please. We also have a significant contractor presence to provide training and technical assistance. We have our Brilliant team. We also have our team at Apprise that provides technical assistance on performance measurement and data reporting. They provide on-site technical assistance visits. They provide webinars. We have also established a peer-to-peer mentorship network that I will talk a little bit about in an upcoming slide. Next slide, please. We have, here's the peer-to-peer mentorship network. We really believe that one of your biggest resources is each other. You deal with the nitty-gritty of LIHEAP administration every day, and your perspective is definitely different from our own. And we think it's very valuable. So we really encourage you to participate in our mentorship program by emailing liheap.mentoring@brilliant.com. You can ask to sign up to be a mentor or a mentee. It's a little one-page form you need to fill out to tell us what you're interested in and what topics you would like to be a mentor in or you would like to receive mentoring in. And we will match you up with an appropriate mentor or mentee. Again, we find this to be a very valuable experience when done well. Oftentimes, the best thing to do is to find out how somebody else is dealing with the same problem you're dealing with. And the best way to do that is to become part of the mentoring program. Next slide. I do want to mention that we have 4 regional conferences this year. The first is coming up in New York in March. There's another one in San Antonio in April. There's one in Portland in May and one in Denver in June. As you can see, we have suggested assignments based on region of which meeting you should attend. But if the dates or locations don't work for you, you can attend a different one. There at the bottom of the slide is our conference website link, and that is where you can go to register for the meeting. There is no registration fee. You can also find out all the logistical information about hotels and where the meetings are held. I will say that the deadline to get a hotel room at the government per diem rate for the New York meeting is fast approaching. So if that is the meeting you think you'd like to go to, I really encourage you to make that hotel reservation very soon. You can always cancel. I believe there is a 48-hour cancellation policy, but I would not want you to be stuck paying outrageous Manhattan hotel prices because you missed the hotel room cutoff date. Next slide, please. We do have several different websites that we'd like to alert you to. First is our federal LIHEAP website. That is our main method of communicating with you. All of our information memoranda are on there, our action transmittals, our Dear Colleague letters, our special topics information. We have FAQs on our website, and we also have a new page called LIHEAP Training Resources, which is the second link on the slide. There you will find recorded webinars from the last few years and links to recordings from our past regional and national meetings. I really encourage you to check out that page. We also pay for something called the LIHEAP Clearinghouse, which is run by our contractor, the National Center for Appropriate Technology. This is basically a collection of how LIHEAP works in other places. Because LIHEAP is a block grant, it runs differently in every tribe and every state. The LIHEAP Clearinghouse tries to compile all of the different information into one site. So if you want to look at somebody else's LIHEAP application, if you want to see what someone's vendor agreement looks like, if you want to know how Kansas is running their program as opposed to New York, you can check all of that out on the LIHEAP Clearinghouse. And then finally, there's the performance management website. This website does require a username and password. If you do not have a username and password for this site, please contact your regional liaison. They'll be able to set you up with one. This website helps grantees use data about their programs to manage how well the program operates, and it also helps them understand and begin to collect the required performance measures data. If you are a state, you will be required to start collecting that as of October 1st, 2015. Next slide, please. So now we're going to open it up to questions.
All right. We do have a few questions, and our first question is from Christine Kell. And Christine, I'm going to go ahead and unmute your line. And you're unmuted, and you can go ahead and read your questions that you have there.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, we can.
Okay. My question was, the first question I kind of recalled, but the second one, I guess, was using, if we chose to use net income versus gross income, where would we document that? And I realized we would probably put that on our matrix for the year. Is that correct?
Yeah, a couple places. I mean, first, that is a specific question in the LIHEAP model plan. So you'd need to tell us in the plan if you're planning on using net income or gross income. Second, I would say that should go in your LIHEAP policy manual, where you write down all of your rules for how LIHEAP is administered. And then, yeah, third, somewhere on the benefit matrix, you could note that income is based on net income. Absolutely.
Okay, and then the second question, thank you, was do all grantees, do we have to comply with the $815 maximum benefit?
No, the $815 maximum benefit was an average. There
Okay.
is no rule for what the maximum benefit has to be. We just we ask grantees every year what their maximum benefit is, and then we just compute an average just so we kind of know approximately how much people are giving out. But it's not a requirement, not at all.
Okay. Thank you very much for answering my question.
You're welcome.
Okay, and if anyone else would like to ask a question, you can either raise your hand with using the raise your hand icon located on the webinar control panel, or you can type your question into the questions pane, and then we'll address your questions as they come in. And so far, those are the questions that we have at this point. Does anybody else want to ask a question? Oh, we have another question from Gloria Ferguea. And let's see. And Gloria, you can go ahead. You're unmuted. You can go ahead with your question.
Okay, I wanted to ask about the 10% administrative cost. Because as a new program manager or administrator for LIHEAP, there's a lot of opportunities to attend these important meetings for the first year, and the 10% really defeats the whole purpose of attending these trainings, because we don't have the funding to go to each one, and each one has a different set of agenda items which really pertains to new directors, and I just wanted to know how that can be resolved in the future.
Well, the 10% cap for administrative costs is in the LIHEAP statute, so there's no real way for us to resolve that other than for Congress to change the law. I will say that if you receive less than $20,000, and you're a tribe, the cap is actually 20%, but only if you receive $20,000 or less total for the year. You know, we do encourage all of our grantees to participate, and one of the reasons we have regional meetings every other year is to try to lower the cost of travel so that you can go to one that is relatively nearby. And you know, we do not have a registration fee, but apart from that, you do still have to pay your way to attend the training and to stay at a hotel while you're there. It is up to you which trainings you'd like to attend. We certainly encourage all of our grantees to make it a priority to come to our regional trainings. And we allow the use of LIHEAP funds to pay for that as out of your administrative costs, but we understand that that may not always be possible.
Okay, can I add another question in here?
Sure. Okay,
under the household count, like if a person's receiving the TANF or food stamp or SSI, and they have a daughter or son who's earning regular income, who's over the age of 40 or so, do we count his income in here?
Well, it all depends on whether or not you're using categorical eligibility or not. If you are using categorical eligibility, then if one person in the household receives that benefit at TANF, SSI, SNAP, or certain veterans programs, then you are allowed to consider the whole household eligible without any further evidence of income. However, you don't have to do that, and you can choose not to, in which case you would be counting the income of everyone living in that household.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have another question from Louise Kettinger. And you're unmuted, Louise. Oh, somebody. There you go.
Wanting to know with the application process, here in Alaska, we are going to be losing a huge majority, if not all, our ACAP funds, which was state supplemental funds for our LIHEAP program that help us continue our LIHEAP program through May 15th. Well, this coming year, it's going to be gone, so I'm not sure if it would be advantageous for us to, and if we could, do a flat rate to each client. Say every client gets $500, every client gets $400, you know, just so it can last the full time through May 15th. Or
yeah. In terms of regular,
currently we use.
The LIHEAP statute does require you to vary the benefit using a matrix, so you cannot provide a flat amount to everybody for regular heating assistance.
Okay. So I can just adjust my point system.
Rules.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you don't have to stick to your current point system. You could change.
No, that's what I mean. I could adjust my point system and make it go. I mean, not give as much.
Yeah, I mean, you can not give as much, or you can give the same amount and be okay with the fact that you will serve fewer people. That's kind of one of those policy decisions that you have to make.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep. You're welcome.
We have a question from Sharon Cook, and Sharon, you can go ahead.
Okay, my question is, and I have the customer right outside my office, as a matter of fact. She is a substitute teacher, and what I want to know is, have any of the other states, do they have a policy on how to estimate the income, the gross income for a substitute teacher? On her pay stub, she has the potential salary for the 10 months that she would probably work during the school year. But she's saying that she doesn't necessarily work every month or every week of the 10 months that are possible for her to work. So, we're suggesting that she give us last year's W-2 form that shows exactly how much she made last year instead of the current year that she's in. Or do you use all the pay stubs up until this point? I mean, what have the experiences been with other states?
Oh, that's a really great question. Does anybody else want to raise their hand and see if they can answer Sharon's question? I'm going to take a crack at it if nobody raises their hand, but it'd be great to hear from somebody else on the line.
Okay.
We have, well, we did. We had someone raise their hand, but I don't know if they, okay, Nancy.
But maybe they just had their own question. Okay,
yeah, I don't know if she raised her
Sharon,
hand.
I'm going to say a couple things. There's not a requirement in the statute to collect a full year's worth of income. Some grantees collect a month of income. Some grantees collect a quarter of income. So it depends on what your rules are around that. I would say, though, that it would have to be actual income and not potential income. I would say that potential income is not really a fair representation of resources available.
I agree 100% with what you just said, because she came in with her current pay stub that has her potential for the school year as being $26,000. Well, she, so what she wanted us to do was originally to use that, but we were going to divide that by 10 months because 2 months out of the year, the kids are on summer break, or 3 months out of the year, we use 10. So my thing was, well, the only other thing I can ask you to do is to go get the W-2 for calendar year 15.
Well, I would also see if she can provide you with actual, real pay stubs for the last 30 days or 60 days or 90 days. I mean, her pay stub somewhere on there has to say how much she actually got paid.
It does. She does. But again, the potential for $26,000, which takes her over the income limit, or $29,000, I think it was. It takes her over the income allowance. And so
I think it would be, I would personally have an issue with counting potential income as income.
Yeah, I agree.
I think lots of people who are like self-employed or seasonal or something like that, states ask for their tax returns from the prior year.
That's
Absolutely.
what I think the policy is that we're going to stick to, because I've had that same instance with a guy that said he was self-employed. He had nothing to show. I said, but in order for us to even work with you, you've got to bring us something. Your tax statement from last year, from 2015, will work. And so I think that's a good suggestion for us to use across the board for self-employed, or like crossing guards. I've had that situation with a crossing guard, and now the substitute teacher that's outside my office right now. So.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Good luck. You're welcome.
Okay.
And Yulia, Nancy did want to chime in on that subject, so I'll go ahead and...
Oh, go for it, Nancy.
Nancy, you're
what I
unmuted.
require them to do is to bring in their previous tax return on seasonal, self-employed, and truck drivers, and substitute teachers.
Cool. Thank you.
Huh?
I said thank you.
You're welcome. We have had so much rain down here, our phone lines are blocked up, so you hear an echo, it's my rain.
Okay, and we have another question from Dustin, and Dustin, you're unmuted.
Hi. So I had a couple questions on, let's see, fridges and ranges. We do energy efficient appliances like water heaters, and we had Tom Reel come in for technical assistance, and he said fridges and ranges, water heaters would be okay, but fridges and ranges he wasn't sure on. And we've been doing this in the past, but we kind of put a hold on it because of this situation. We're wondering, is that an allowable cost with LIHEAP? And also, I also heard, well, that's my first question. I'll come to my second question later.
Okay. So with refrigerators and ranges, the idea behind weatherization is to improve energy efficiency and lower bills. So if you're replacing a 1970s refrigerator with a new one, and you're using LIHEAP rules for your weatherization, which I am pretty sure you are, that would be an acceptable expenditure. If you're just giving somebody a second refrigerator, then you're not really lowering their energy bill or increasing energy efficiency, and I would find that questionable.
I see. Okay, that makes a lot.
See what I'm saying? So you need to be replacing something that's old and inefficient or broken.
Okay. And inefficient. Okay.
Yeah, I think what you want to be like the key word is like improve efficiency, right? So,
yes.
right? So, you know, it might be a little bit harder with ranges. But, you know, there are grantees who use weatherization funds under LIHEAP rules who do appliance replacement like that. So you were not the only one that does this. I think, you know, it's a one-for-one swap, right? So you have to take away the old thing. They don't get to keep the old thing.
Yeah,
right?
Of course.
Because, you know, like, you'll give them a new one and they'll say they'll throw away the old one, but they'll plug it in their garage or whatever and have it, you know? So, you know, what we would, when I worked at a local agency, not only would we take away the old refrigerator, we'd get a receipt at the dump and put that in the client file to show that we disposed of the old appliance.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So there's a thought too.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. So, like, when it comes to the efficiency, are we going to probably be looking at something before the Energy Star rating that was happening?
Yeah. I mean, you know, HHS cannot endorse a particular brand of anything or a particular energy efficient rating system, but you'd want to. There are multiple out there. Energy Star is one of them.
Okay. And so my second question would be, we can go ahead and use crisis funding according to the slideshow. For like temporary housing, because we had a situation where we had an elder that her furnace broke down, but the problem was that that was her primary energy source, and we had to house her in the hotel.
Yep.
And we had to wait for the piece to go ahead and come in, which took about 10 days.
Yep. You can pay for her hotel with crisis funding.
Oh, okay. That is definitely good to know. So when we go ahead and do something like this, we would want to go ahead and be very specific on that point, where like if we have to go ahead and house them, it would have to be definitely like the weather or primary heating or cooling type of related.
Yeah, so what you'd need a couple things in your LIHEAP plan. One, in your definition of crisis, you need to have your furnace is broken. And it's really cold outside, or your air conditioner is broken and it's really hot outside. Because it's not a crisis if your furnace is broken in July, right?
Yeah, that is true.
Right. So that would be one thing that you would need to have in there. A second thing you'd need to have in there in the LIHEAP plan is there's a question about if you have a maximum crisis benefit, and you would want to make sure that that maximum was high enough to cover something like a week-long stay in a hotel.
Okay.
Or you could put in, like, you could, in that question on the plan, you could put in something like $500 if that's your regular crisis maximum for bill payment assistance, but then attach a document that says, in addition to this, we also provide temporary shelter for which we do not have a crisis maximum, or for which we set the crisis maximum to, I don't know, $2,000. I'm making stuff up. But so just make sure that you address the possibility of temporary shelter in terms of your maximum benefit.
Okay. Yeah, those were my 2 questions. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, we have a question from Jim Collins. Jim, you can go ahead. You're unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. We're told by the other local energy assistance agencies, they have told clients that if they're a native household that they have to apply through the Klamath tribes here. I always believed that people could apply anywhere they wanted. If there were more than one agency in a county, that they couldn't really discriminate. Is that my interpretation correct or not?
It depends, which I know is not the best answer. So if the tribe has a agreement with the Klamath tribes, Oregon or Washington? I always forget.
Oregon.
Oregon, sorry. I was going to say Washington. I'm like, oh, maybe it's Oregon. If you have an agreement with the state of Oregon, it should cover who you serve versus who they serve. If you do not have an agreement with the state of Oregon, then you are required to serve any household in your service area where at least one member is a Native American. And no, they do not have the option of applying to wherever they want. They have to either apply with the state or apply with the tribe. And that is something you should work out in writing with the state so that everybody knows who's going where and who's sending who where.
Okay, the problem that we're facing is that there's just not enough funding to, if someone goes in, they indicate that they may have some Native ancestry, they're sent to us. We're running out of money, pretty early in the year.
Yeah, so I recommend that you sit down with the state coordinator in Oregon. His name is David Kaufman, and you work out an arrangement, an agreement that talks about who is responsible for serving whom. And if you feel like you're taking on more than what your funding is capable of carrying, then part of your agreement can be a negotiation for increasing the level of funding that you receive.
We will do that. And I don't want people to feel like I'm dumping on the state here, because we do work with them. We use their computer system and computing eligibility and benefit labels. They've been great to work with.
Well, and see, there's the thing. If you're using their benefit matrix is designed based on how much money they get, not how much money you get. So it may very well be that you cannot afford to be issuing the same amount, the same level of benefits as the state of Oregon. And if you want to stick with matching their benefit, which I think is a generally speaking good practice because you want to make sure that everything is fair, like you wouldn't want somebody to be able to apply at the state and get 5 times more than they would at the tribe or vice versa, then you really should sit down with them and have a discussion about your allocation amount and who you're responsible for serving, because it really is important to have everybody clear on who's responsible for which population, because you don't want to have people bouncing back and forth. And you want to be able to budget appropriately based on an expectation of who you're supposed to be serving.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we have another question from Margaret Zintek. Margaret, your line is unmuted. You can go ahead.
Thank you. This is Margaret Zintek. Citizen Potawatomi Nation. And actually, I had a comment on the Klamath one and one on the self-employed. In terms of the state of Oklahoma, our people are going either place, but we coordinate with verifications between us and the other tribes in the area as well as the state that they're not double dipping. But it is the client's choice, and in our minds here that they choose the one they want, and we that's the way we've been working it here in Oklahoma. In terms of the self-employed, I had some ideas for the person who is having trouble documenting. We have had to go to show me your business card, show me your flyer, show me your records that you keep, because we have people that just went into business. They actually showed me their tax ID number. I mean, they did not have a past history of self-employment, so there was no way to show me last year's taxes of being self-employed. Like your teacher, if this is her first year being a substitute, there's no real way that she can give you a history of what her income might be, other than a statement from the employer what it has been as far as she's worked to date. Like the self-employed person, like a hairdresser, they have a record that they keep, and we ask to show us what your records. Give me copies of your records, your appointment books.
I think that's a really great idea.
And we can verify with, you know, the guy that's a handyman and goes around and cleans lawns. We're able to call and verify, yes, he did, you know, we get that kind of stuff. But sometimes you have to figure out, how can I, you know, tell me how I can back it up. I think one of my last ones I had recently had just gotten her tax ID number and was just setting up, had not had business yet. And we were trying to document the zero income for that time frame. I mean, I could document up to the point she was initiating her business. Someone had been supporting her, but then she was on her own. It's like, show me. So she brought in the letter and the tax ID number she had created, the business cards and the flyers she had set up. So we were able to document that month of zero income. So sometimes you have to be creative how you document that.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we have a question from Maria Howard. Maria, you're unmuted. You can go ahead.
I didn't so much have a question, but a lot of these are problems that, and instances that we've run across too, and Margaret is a fellow Okie tribe person here, so she understands this too, but we also have the agreement with the state that, you know, if we think that they have gone to the state, we just pick up the phone and call them and make sure that they're not duplicating services. But we also have our limits are based on our plan, where I can't imagine if we went by the state's plan. The state of Oklahoma doesn't have as open of a window to help the clients as we do. So, and then also on the appliance thing, we come into that a lot of times, and we go by they have to be energy efficient to help reduce their utility bill, so that maybe they don't need as much help in the future.
Great. Thank you.
All right, we have Nancy again, and I'm not sure if, Nancy, you have a question again, or it looks like some of them are different comments. If you want to go ahead, Nancy, you're muted.
My question is, I thought that we could only purchase energy efficient, like refrigerators, air conditioners, generators, but not ranges, because I didn't think that was used to cool or heat with. And that's the reason I was wondering.
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. This question actually came up in the early 90s, and we went back to the source, and we looked up these reports that are written by congressional committees who write the laws. And they talk about their intentions when they write the law. And in these reports, we found a description that says that LIHEAP was never designed to exclude the cost of heating or cooling food or of cooking.
Okay.
So things like refrigerators, things like fuel for cooking, if like, let's see, what's a good example, Puerto Rico, they have a cooling program mostly, but they also provide cooking fuel. Those are all acceptable LIHEAP expenditures. So you can use ranges, do ranges, but the goal for ranges is you have to take away the old one. Same thing as the fridge, right? Take away the old one. They don't get to keep the old one. And the thing you put in there has to be energy efficient.
The company that I use takes them as a courtesy where children won't get them and get hurt, because we've had several children that have suffocated laying in them, and they take them automatically.
Okay, okay, great. Oh, you mean like the old refrigerator?
They pick them up. They won't let them stay there. When they replace it,
perfect.
They take them.
Right.
I just wanted to make sure, because I've got some elderly people I was trying to find a stove for.
Yeah, you can definitely do it out of your weatherization funds. But make sure in your model plan you say that, you know, you're going to be doing weatherization, and you fill out all of the information about your weatherization component.
I'll have to see in my project manager and DC an email on the update after tribal council and all my committee meetings on it.
All right.
All right.
Sounds good.
Bye-bye.
We have another question from Dustin, and Dustin, your line is unmuted. You can go ahead.
My question is this. I recently got back from a 477 regional, and we were talking about the CSBG and how that's going to be integrated into the 477 Public Law 477-102, or vice versa. But there was also discussion on the possibility of LIHEAP being implemented into the 477 or 477-102. Is there any talks of that happening sometime in the near future?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, yeah, that was my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And we have one other question from Margaret Zentek. Margaret, you're unmuted.
Thank you. I'm the co-chair for Public Law 102-477 Tribal Work Group, and we are working on the national level on identifying programs that can be included in 477. So to answer his questions, that's actually at a higher level. We're working up in D.C. with Terrence Parks at Bureau of Indian Affairs, Human Services, and then he's working with cohorts in D.C. on identifying problems. What we were talking about at that 477 Tribal Work Group is CSBG has been authorized, has been agreed upon. His name's Seth Haslett, but they're quibbling over whether LIHEAP can be, and Terry Parks is still having that conversation. So we're still working with HHS at that level to get LIHEAP as an allowable in 477.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, and those are all of our questions that we have, and we are a little bit over the time, so I'm going to hand it back to, well, I'll go ahead and read all the topics. Or did you have anything else you wanted to cover, Yulia?
No, go ahead. I was just going to read this last slide.
Oh. Okay. One final reminder for everyone is that please remember to attend the Part 2 of the LIHEAP 101 overview next Wednesday from 1:30 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. That way you have the complete overview of LIHEAP. And the topics that will be covered will be grantee roles and responsibilities, grant monitoring, monitoring client files, and reporting. And then any
I actually think it's from 2 to 3:30, just like this one was.
Okay. And if you have any further questions, please email them to Brilliant at bsinnarajah. It's BSINNARAJAH at Brilliant, BRILGENT.com. And thank you for your attendance. And Yulia, I'll just turn it back over to you if you want to add anything else in that time.
No, I just want to thank everybody for their participation, and hopefully we will see all of you guys back on February 3rd. And thank you very much for the lively